You're listening to the Multifamily Marketwatch for Washington State. Apartment owners who need to know, trust HFO. The leading source for multifamily industry news around the state, from Puget Sound to the Tri-Cities.
Welcome to HFO's Multifamily Marketwatch update for Washington State. I'm your host, HFO broker Aaron Kirk Douglas. Here's some recent industry news you may have missed since our last podcast. A federal court of appeals seems skeptical of a Seattle law preventing landlords from asking about the criminal background of prospective tenants. A California appeals court upholds a law requiring landlords to pay a month of rent to evicted tenants. Yardi Matrix reports average rents rose to an all-time high in June. And the Washington, D.C.-based policy and research group Up for Growth says the U.S. housing deficit doubled between 2012 and 2019. All this and more in just a moment. HFO's podcasts are sponsored by Gantry Inc., the nation's largest independent mortgage banking firm. Now on to our news briefing. The Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals seems skeptical of a Seattle law preventing landlords from asking about the criminal backgrounds of prospective tenants recently. One judge told the Seattle City Attorney's Office lawyer that she thought the ordinance seemed overbroad. The law was passed by the Seattle City Council in 2018 and faced an immediate court challenge from the Rental Housing Association. After a district court upheld the ordinance, the landlords appealed to the Ninth Circuit. In other legal news, the San Francisco Chronicle reports a state appeals court has upheld a California law that requires a property owner legally evicting a tenant to pay 1 month's rent to reduce relocation costs. That law took effect in 2020 and also limited rent increases to 10% a year in areas without local rent control. While the ruling on this lawsuit was pending, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld an ordinance from Oakland that required rental owners to pay all of illegally evicted tenants' relocation expenses. Yardi Matrix reports multifamily performance was strong in June, despite economic deceleration in some other markets. Year-over-year growth 50 basis points to 13.7%. That's down from the February peak of 15.2%. Demand and growth remain strong across the country, with rents up at least 10% year-over-year in 25 of Yardi's top 30 metro areas. National occupancy rates were 96%. High occupancy and demand propelled rents up an average of $19 to an all-time high of $1,706 in June. While Yardi Matrix reported metro rents up about 14%, the U.S. Labor Department cited overall rent growth of 5.8% through June. But regardless of the exact increase, Moody's Analytics chief economist Mark Zandi says market rents may be topping out as renters are not able to afford higher rents and are starting to balk. But he says even with more supply coming, it may still be a year or two before we see a meaningful impact. The Washington, D.C.-based policy and research group Up for Growth says the U.S. housing deficit doubled from 2012 to 2019 to 3.8 million units. The latest data indicates Washington State's 2019 deficit was 140,000 housing units. Up for Growth's 76-page report was co-sponsored by many companies and organizations, including the National Multifamily Housing Council and Eco Northwest. It is available for download from the HFO website under Services Research and at upforgrowth.org. WalletHub announced its rankings of the best and worst cities in the country for renters last week. The personal finance website ranked 182 U.S. cities by 22 measures related to rental attractiveness and quality of life. Those included rental rates, cost of living, and the availability of employment. The group ranked Seattle number 48, despite the city's fifth highest city satisfaction index and a strong job market. Other cities didn't rank quite as well, with Spokane at 120 and Tacoma at 149. Vancouver ranked 175 out of 182. WalletHub analyst Jill Gonzalez said the other three cities ranked lower due to low inventory, cost of living, and large security deposit requirements. The New York Times wrote extensively about rising rents this month. Experts now warn that the Fed's increased interest rates will also likely cause rents to increase. The central bank's attempt to cool down the economy and contain inflation pushed up mortgage costs and have been keeping demand for scant apartments booming. The Times reporters say it's tough to predict how big or how long the Fed-induced bump in rental demand might be. It could ironically make it more difficult to lower inflation in the near term. That's because rent-related costs make up nearly 1/3 of the Consumer Price Index inflation measure, and anything that makes it climb is likely to perpetuate rapid inflation. The Center Square reports that property owners in Spokane will need less money to add a separate housing unit to their land. On July 6th, the Spokane City Council adopted the following changes for developing accessory dwelling units. Fees were lowered from about $1,800 to $350. The maximum size of a detached ADU increased from 600 to 975 square feet. The roof allowance was increased from 17 to 25 feet. Minimum lot sizes of 5,000 square feet were removed, and ADUs are now allowed on properties with a duplex or a triplex. The City of Bellevue has announced it will focus on affordable housing and infrastructure this fiscal year. Bellevue recently altered its multifamily property tax exemption to set aside 10% or more of its housing units for people earning 80% of the area median income. Bellevue is also partnering with Microsoft, Amazon, and the King County Housing Authority to buy apartment buildings and redevelop them for more affordable housing opportunities. Speaking of Bellevue, its downtown is anticipating a wave of mega projects, according to The Urbanist. Those projects include a 15-tower development known as Pinnacle North and South on Northeast 10th and Northeast 8th Streets. Primarily residential, Pinnacle North will contain 1,181 residential units, along with office space, retail, resident amenities, and other commercial uses, plus 1,800 parking spaces. They'll span 7 towers between 9 and 26 stories. Pinnacle South is planned to have another 125,000 square feet of office space, 1,500 residential units, 114,000 square feet of retail, 177 hotel rooms, and 2,500 parking spaces over 8 towers. Aside from the 2,700 apartments in those projects, another massive project with more hotel rooms and 103 condos is planned. And finally, a new project applied for a pre-application conference is a 4-building development with 3 mid-rises and 1 28-story tower with 950 apartments and 1,250 parking spaces. But that's not all. Several more mega projects are in the planning stages, including office towers with 1.5 million square feet of office space for Amazon. In total, across the 17 projects under construction and plan, there are 67 buildings in these mega building construction projects. Most of the 67 will meet or exceed double digits in height, transforming the Bellevue skyline forever. If approved and constructed, the projects would add over 8,200 residential units, 12 million square feet of commercial space, 1,450 hotel rooms, and nearly 30,000 parking spaces. And you can read more about these projects and see many pictures and plans by visiting theurbanist.org. The data analytics firm Green Street reports that second quarter apartment prices have increased 15% year over year, despite a drop of 4% in June. The Seattle Times says that every year, when the weather gets warmer, children in the Puget Sound area fall out of windows. Last year, Snohomish County alone had 22 window falls, and in Seattle, it was above 30. If you are a landlord and have the ability, please consider installing window guards and locks to prevent windows from opening or sliding more than a limited number of inches, and encourage tenants with small children to move their furniture away from windows. In other Seattle news, the city's economic displacement relocation assistance will be available to tenants facing an increase of at least 10% of their total housing costs in 1 year if they're making 80% or less of the AMI. The city plans to pay qualifying tenants 3 months of their housing costs and then will bill the landlord. The Rental Housing Association of Washington is currently examining a challenge to that law, depending on how the city applies it. And finally, according to Como News, the Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma areas are building homes at the 13th fastest rate in the United States. There were more than 30,000 housing units authorized in the Seattle area in 2021. Still, the rental market remains the nation's 12th most expensive. Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new edition of Multifamily Marketwatch. And in the coming weeks, we'll also offer some exclusive interviews with representatives from the city of Tacoma on steps they're taking to build more housing. And we'll hear from an eviction attorney and a management company executive on issues critical to today's rental investors. And don't forget, you can stay up to date on multifamily news throughout the week by visiting or subscribing to the Northwest Apartment Investor blog on our website.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 206-705-5115 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information. HFO is an affiliate of the Global Real Estate Advisor Network.